we're in. My name is Tatiana, and I am your host for the Open Book Club. Yay, hooray! I started this podcast because I've always wanted to be a part of a book club. I never actually actively searched for one to join, but whatever. I was just like, I will do it myself. So yeah, we're gonna go over chapters 1 through 5, and this book is called Bronze Drum, written by Phong Nguyen. Before we dive into chapters 1 through 5, I do want to give a little bit of context of the perspective that we should have as we read this book and as we talk about it. So it's widely agreed by scholars that Vietnam's origins were a matriarchal society. There was strong feminism through the ages that was absolutely tested when Vietnam was integrated into the Han society. During the times when traditions were ripped, there were influential women in Vietnam to remind the people who they were and where they come from by rising an army of women to drive the Han out. Enter the Trung sisters, where we will read the story, The Bronze Drum. We are going to begin chapter 1. So the book sets the stage for the time period. We're starting in 36 CE. 36 is a wild number. My brain can't even conceptualize 36 CE. Also, CE means Common Era, with the same meaning as AD. I'm telling you because I didn't know, but now we all know. I typically like watching period pieces, but not necessarily reading it because I just can't relate to the details. I can't imagine the details, but if I see it on screen, it's different. However, again, this is a story about sisters rising up and waging war, so I suppose I can imagine that. The writer takes us to the courtyard of Cung Dien Minh Lin. By the way, I am going to do my best to pronounce these Vietnamese words and names. I did Google pronunciation, so just, bear with me. We're in the courtyard of Cung Dien Minh Lin, where Lady Man Tien is wrapped in her blanketed fur, having a bad dream. First of all, Royal, I want a blanketed fur, okay? She asks her husband, Lord Trung, to essentially console her about her feelings of their two daughters, Trung Trak, the oldest, and Trung Ni, the youngest. So both the Lord and Mrs. Lord, or Lady, fear that Trung Trak will never possess the forcefulness of a leader and Trung Ni will never adhere to tradition. So we all have older siblings, right? Or if you don't, I think it's kind of common knowledge that older siblings tend to try to do the right things to appease their parents or guardian. The downfall of that is not necessarily following the beat of their own drum, and that is their fear with Trung Trak. Trung Ni, who is the youngest, possesses the essence of all younger siblings that I can attest to, where they do follow the beat of their own drum, which can be cool, I guess, but the downfall to that is that their choices aren't always a wise choice. Lord Trung reluctantly assured her that what their daughters lack will be strengthened. Cute. A part that I found interesting in chapter 1 is that Lord Trung was like, Trung Ni needs a husband so she can be tamed. And Lady Man Tien's response was, oh, and have you tamed me? Okay, you better tell him. I believe this sets the tone of how strong willing the women are going to be in this book. The fact that that was on the second page of chapter 1 just kind of speaks volumes, of the tradition of Vietnam, or the people of the Vietnamese culture during this time. The lore did mention, sadly, that the Han have tamed them all, which indicates they are under a oppressive ruler. That is actually kind of interesting to me because knowing that Lady Man Tien woke up sleeping in her blanketed furs in this extravagant domain it just makes me think, okay, so obviously you have it good, yet you are oppressed. So I do find that a little interesting. We ultimately learn that Lord Trung is in growing fear every day, to the point that his daughters can sense, hear, and see how fearful he is of the Han invading their court. To see a leader, the father, walking around with a wavering spirit is kind of, it's a little discouraging. And I just think walking around your palace huffing and puffing does not display strong leadership. That's just me, though. Throughout these chapters, we see how the Han traditions are beginning to make their mark in the villages and now amongst the wealthy. The people are now conflicted with continuing what once was and possibly willing to get a taste of these new ideas that the Han brought. We see this conflict between the old and new traditions at the Feast of the Golden Turtle, which I believe is a dinner party where Lord Trung and Lady Man Tien host the lords and ladies of Chu Dian. Feast of the Golden Turtle. Hold on, let me look this up. Feast of the Golden Turtle. I want to look it up because in the NPR article, Feng Nguyen tried to write this piece as historically accurate as possible, and I've never heard of Feast of the Golden Turtle, and I want to know if it truly is a dinner party, so let's see. Okay, the Golden Turtle Festival is the largest international eco-educational project. I don't think this is it. This ain't it. There is a Vietnamese golden turtle symbol that probably has something to do with it. I don't know. If you know, let me know. If this is made up, let me know too, because I don't know. But we got to keep pushing. So they host the lords and ladies of Chu Dian. Things get a little heated when one of the lords asks Lady Man Tien when either of her daughters will marry. Lady Man Tien reminds this lord, okay, that she's not Confucius and her daughters will marry whomever, whenever, and however. Remember the society that they all grew up in. The reason why the topic of marriage is triggering is because women didn't really marry at all. They found their boo to shack up with, have kids, and tell them to visit whenever they wanted them to come. Weekends, every other day, it doesn't matter. So that being the norm, to now being asked to give up a part of yourself for a man just doesn't resonate for some of the lords and ladies, or possibly some of the people of the village or neighboring villages. Then this Lord Nam is like, well, let's hear from your daughters, which he is clearly loving the new patriarchal society for him to speak outside his neck in her own home like that. Like, that's insane. Trung Ni and Trung Trak come downstairs, and the lords and ladies ask them what they think about marriage. Trung Trak gives a diplomatic answer, appeasing both sides. Trung Ni, on the other hand, tells a story about a woman who unalived herself because she was kidnapped by a Han, and she would rather take her own life than be a concubine. Same. That story obviously wasn't a dinner party favorite, so everybody is awkward and quiet and just kind of like, okay, I'm just gonna sip my water and juice. It is, I mean, Trung Trak giving that diplomatic answer is definitely in true fashion of being the older sibling. She's like, I'm not here for the drama. I'm here so I can go back upstairs and lock myself in my room, read my books, and write. And Trung Ni was like, I will answer a question with a horrific story. And I would, based off of the story, I would assume that Trung Ni is like, no, that's what I think of marriage is. I would rather take my life by my own sword than by the hands of a man. I would assume. So the question of whether they believe in marriage still isn't really answered. So ultimately arguments break out and dinner ends on a sour note. This is just a thought. Probably not a good thought. Who knows? So I do find it interesting, or I think that The Hans tradition isn't necessarily forcing its way amongst the people. Like, it's not forcing its way through fear, but I feel like it's kind of spoon feeding the people, and it's like chipping away the old traditional ideas and slowly having them develop the habit of the new ideas. And I do feel like if you want to manipulate people, I don't recommend. I think that you're a horrible person if you do. But if you would like to manipulate people, I feel like that is probably the most effective way to do it. Don't do it so upfront. Do it in a way where you're penetrating the homes and these dinner parties by discussion. Do it by way of discussion. And some people will pick up on it and try to convince other people or themselves that this new tradition or new idea is the way to go. But that is what I'm kind of getting from chapter 1. Chapter 2. So we were introduced to Fan Min in the first chapter, who is the son of the animal keeper of the court grounds. Fan Min's mother is not with him anymore because, well, she got devoured by a tiger. They called him Rang the tiger. So I did try looking up an actual Vietnamese myth on Rang the tiger or of a tiger, and I tried to find some sort of like tiger folktale, but I couldn't really find anything. Again, if you know something about this, please let me know. I didn't find much on my 2 seconds of researching. So in this book, it kind of talks about the background of Rang the tiger, where he comes from. So I'm going to read a little excerpt. So it says, Rang the tiger has a supernatural origin where it was inhabited by the spirit of a jealous man who wished to own a woman whose favors he had once enjoyed. But the woman wished to be free and had become pregnant with another man's child. The man died of grief, but when he came back as Rang the tiger, his spirit was full of vengeance, and he was afflicted by an insatiable hunger for women who were full with child. Whoa. So Fan's fertile mother was unfortunately caught up by Rang the tiger. At this point in the chapter, it's pretty much alluded that Trung Nhi has this immature kid crush on Fan Min. I only say that because their interactions are pretty much like growing up with a boy who's close to your family, and everybody in your family is trying to prophesy marriage just because you guys are in close proximity and the same age. I don't know if you guys seen that before in your family, when the older people are like, oh, look at these 2 3-year-olds. They're gonna marry each other. Is it just me? Because that I never understood that, but okay. Trung Nhi had an interesting request. She told Fan Min to ask his father about getting a dog. I guess Trung Nhi couldn't ask her parents. They forbade it. So Trung Nhi essentially bat her eyes and asked Fan Min to ask his father about getting a dog on the grounds. So Fan Min sees his father about a dog, okay? And his dad straight up told him no, because the pup would terrorize the other animals on the grounds. Rightfully, I mean, I totally understand that. Fan Min thought that the dog would protect the animals from Rang the tiger. Girl. Anyway. Fan Min gets the dog anyways, and at this point, he needs to find a way to sneak it into the palace. He was going to throw this pup over the gate, bless his heart, but realized he couldn't do it alone. So he finds Dewey, the beggar, stumbling about and promises to return with a big bag of rice. That way Dewey can feed his family, so long as he helps him smuggle the pup over the gate. Dewey was hesitant, but he needs to feed his family, so the plan is on. And here's when things start ramping up. So Trung Nhi receives the gift of the pup and was all hot and bothered now for Fan Min. She promises to keep the dog hidden in her room until her parents warm up to the idea, and Fan Min is like, yes, please, my dad will kill me, literally, if he finds out I went behind his back. And guess what? She failed her one job. The pup made its way outside and started bothering the other animals and livestock. So Fan Min's father, the gardener, started laying into him because he just knew it was his badass son. So he was basically like, well, now I'm gonna get fired and we're both gonna be walking around like Dewey begging for some rice. So Fan Min is like, oh, that's a great idea. By the way, Dad, it wasn't me. It was Dewey the beggar. It was all his fault. And for whatever reason, having this puppy on the court grounds is a crime, so Dewey was sentenced by public flogging. Fan Min, on his self-proclaimed restoring honor journey, decides to attend the flogging where he faces his punishment by watching Dewey take his place. And that just pissed me off, because your punishment is guilt. Your punishment is having empathy for a man who is getting whipped for your crime, and it's messed up. It really is. So it gets worse into chapter 3. Here we are at the flogging. A Han officer walks up to the Lord's guard, Ka, inquiring about the ruckus, and the ruckus is the public flogging. Ka talks about the crime, and Dewey is charged with tampering of the Lord's land by way of the dog. The Han officer essentially said, flogging is for babies, and the Han way is punishment by death. Ka refutes that idea. However, the Han politely was like, I'm not asking you, I'm telling you. Ka then unfortunately took the axe to Dewey, the innocent beggar's neck. Meanwhile, in the palace, Trung Ni's mom found out about the puppy and was like, perhaps you can keep it, but I don't want you around that gardener's kid anymore because he's just not like us. Sweetie, he's poor. And Ni was basically like, okay, shoot, I got my dog. Maybe one day, we can live happily ever after. But as of right now, I will live happily throughout the day with my new pup. Girl, the juxtaposition of the villagers witnessing a public execution, possibly for the first time, and Trung Ni going about her day with her new dog, it's beyond me. And needless to say, she's like huffing and puffing, wishing to like partake in the village activities as well. I will say, reading that gives a little insight into how materially fortunate people don't know what they don't know. So how they react to the harsh realities of the world is a product of the rose-colored glasses that were given to them since birth. And can we really be upset that they are not privy to the harsh realities or can't understand it or don't even know about it? Like, this also reminds me of the reels that I would watch about people having quote-unquote rich friends and how their rich friends' advice was always so obscene and tone-deaf that they realize, like, oh, my rich friend truly doesn't know that people struggle to simply live. Anyway, Trung Ni is giving me that. So it is interesting that she knows that Fan Min has this little crush on her, and perhaps she has one back, but she uses it to her advantage to get this dog, not really thinking about the consequence and how it'll affect not just Fan Min, but whoever else Fan Min brings into the scheme of smuggling the dog to the court. So, and then the fact that her mom was like, I suppose you can keep the dog, like, after someone got beheaded. It's insane to me. It's insane. But like I said, the insight is that, like, I don't think the mom truly knew. Like, I don't think the mom or Trung Ni, hell, even the Lord, I don't think anyone at the court knew that this was going on, that they did not know that Dewey the beggar is getting beheaded for the dog that Trung Ni can have and enjoy. So it makes me not like Trung Ni right now, I'm not gonna lie. So going into chapter 4. Lord Trung was summoned to go see the Han governor, To Din. and the Han governor needed him to come ASAP. Lord Trung needed a reason to give to his people for this abrupt absence, so he had the idea to bring his eldest daughter, Trung Trak, along, where he would lie and say that he was going to find her a husband. I don't really understand this. I didn't even necessarily look up like the rules of like royal families. I guess if you leave, you have to let the people know where you're going or why you're going to be gone. But sure, he decided to take his daughter so he can lie. He probably did not want anyone to worry about why the Han governor summoned him immediately. They arrive and wait in a room for Governor Todin to join them. They kneel for an hour in the heat, waiting for the governor to arrive. I found this interesting, and maybe I'm reaching, but I feel like making the Lord and his daughter wait that long after expressing a haste summons is a power move. Like, I feel like the Han governor was asserting dominance, trying to send a message that Lord Trung may still have his palace or court as a Vietnamese, but the Han is still in control. The Han governor, Todin, finally meets Lord Trung and Trung Trak. Lord Trung presents a gift where the book does that thing where the title of the book is written in the story. He presents a bronze drum. Dun, 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 dun. This drum is considered one of the national symbols of Vietnam. If you Google a photo of it, you'll see that it looks like it can produce quite a sound. Okay, it really does look magnificent. And yeah, the symbol of it is it's interesting, and I think it's pretty cool. Take a look. Lord Trung says, quote, "We brought a ceremonial drum as a gift, which signifies the pride of our people, which we now share with the Han." And the Han governor, Todin, said, "A bronze drum. Isn't that the drum that the Viets would strike on the battlefield when at war with the Han? Like, how dare you do that?" Then the Lord responds by saying, well, it's also a representation of peace. Then Trung Trak chimes in and says it's also a musical instrument. And I do wonder if this was intended to be snarky, because that is exactly how I read it. I don't know if she was just trying to like save her father from this like awkward exchange, but like she was just like, and it also produces a sound like if you tap it. So anyway, Trung Trak spoke out of turn. Period. Like, if you remember, in her tradition, the woman is treated like a human being, but the Han has patriarchal ideas. She spoke out of turn, and the tension is now thick in the room as the Lord is asking the governor to forgive his daughter for being out of line. Oh my God. I can't imagine the cognitive dissonance that Trung Trak had. Like, I don't know if I would have the power to stay quiet for the duration of the meeting like Trung Trak. And I'm not saying that being like, oh, ain't nobody gonna tell me what to do. But just keep in mind, like, Trung Trak grew up with this idea that she can speak up however she wants to, her opinion is safe, and she will simply be heard, to now just being dismissed. So the cognitive dissonance is big here, I might add. She might have been shocked. But what I found quite powerful, though, was how she put her father's honor before her own at that moment. There was an instance where she wanted to speak on behalf of her father, but knew that it would display weakness in him if she helped him navigate the conversation that he was having with the Han governor. It's just amazing the things that women do to appease the ego of a man by, like, even thinking proactively like that. Like, you know what? If I try to help keep the flow of the conversation for my dad, they're gonna look down on him and eventually, like, the people who are following him. And she knows he's weak. in a way, right? She knows his weaknesses. She knows that he's been huffing and puffing around the palace, yet she still is standing behind him publicly, especially in front of the governor, in front of his boss. So, I found that interesting, and I did find that powerful, because sometimes you have to know your place. Sometimes you have to know when to be humbled. You have to know when to eat the bows that are being thrown at you, that is just some things that I value in a leader, is just knowing when to speak and knowing when to shut the hell up. I do wonder though, like if Trung Nhi went along on this trip, they would have been dead. They would have all died, because she probably would have been a little bit too radical and impulsive. Anyway, so as Trung Trac has this internal struggle of being invisible and having to fall in line, the Han governor gets to the point of why he summoned Lord Trung. Lord Trung does not have a son for an heir to his estate. Lord Trung tried to petition his daughter Trung Trac, who is currently still kneeling and staring at the ground. But the Han governor wasn't having it, of course. So Lord Trung said, all right, I will marry my daughter off within a year, and you can entrust my future son-in-law with my domain. The air that I would be punching, oh my God. If I were kneeling, I would be clenching my fist, because I'd be like, dang, like, I've been working so hard to get this thing passed down from you, and now it's stripped away from me because another person is telling you no. Like, you didn't even try to fight for, like, you requested that I be the heir, but you didn't even really try to fight. You just kind of like compromised, and we're like, it wasn't even a compromise. You didn't even compromise. You were just kind of like, okay, yeah, that's fine. I will just marry my daughter off. I will go against everything that I taught my daughters right now, and we'll go with your new idea, Han governor. Crazy. Okay, chapter 5. In the final chapter of this episode, we witness Trung Nhi's first moment of leadership and strength. Throughout the first few chapters, we read about Trung Nhi wandering the streets, acquainting herself with the gamblers, drunkards, and a prostitute named Mai. She also found herself a little situationship, okay? He gets dirty, he has tattoos, and is experienced in the petting department, that's what they said, or what the writer said in the book. One night, Trung Nhi popped outside with her village boo. It gets late. Her boo is trying to get her to go home, but she wasn't ready to go. By the time he was able to nudge her along, Rang the tiger jumps out, ravenous for a fertile woman to devour. Instinctually, she wanted to shut her eyes, scream, and possibly run. Yet, she had this epiphany that no one was going to save her but herself. Trung Nhi stretched out that arm and was like, no, not today. Like, I'm just imagining with her arm stretched out and her hand on her hip. Like, that is just... Okay. Rang the tiger slowly approached her, ready to get into this prey. But Trung Nhi started her period, which made Rang turn the other way. Girl, okay, so at first I read this for face value, right? And I was like, so she started her period, like, is the writer trying to call me dirty because I started my period and now I'm not, like, a delectable meat? Like, what? And I just didn't know what to take from it. But, you know, as I'm digesting this part of the chapter, I realized, as I said earlier, that this is a display of her strength just birthing to light, right? So unless I missed the context about women of the village knowing Rang won't eat them if they're on their period, I don't think Trung Nhi knew that. If she didn't, she went against her innate instinct to stand against this tiger. Often, we find ourselves in challenging situations that we want to instinctually run from. And maybe being brave isn't natural to some of us. So I wonder what the results would be if we siphon our strength from our fear and face what we're running from. And that's exactly what Trung Nhi did. She wanted to run from Ring the Tiger. She decided that she was going to save herself and figure out what was on the other side of standing up for yourself. What's on the other side of facing my fear? Her little boyfriend, though, I don't know where he went. He left her for dead, okay? Moral of the chapter, save yourself. So, something that stood out to me in chapter 3 that I want to share really quick was so Feng Ti-Chin, who is a cook at the palace, was talking to someone about how she has to be a different mother to her different sons. So she has to be a stern mother to one son and a lax mother to another son. And what I thought was interesting was Trung Trac's takeaway as she overheard this conversation. She said, "What is military strategy but speed of thought?" And I love that. I love the fact that she's applying the type of woman or mother figure that we watch wear many hats to military strategy, because it is true. Like, well, I've never been to war and I've never been in the military, but I would assume that you would have to think on your feet and improvise. And that is something that I feel like is in all women. We have this instinct to jump ship when and where needed. We know how to pivot seamlessly, and I've especially seen that quote unquote superpower amongst women who become mothers, or who has this motherly essence about them. So I thought that I just love that, and once again, repeating myself, I love that she applied that to a military strategy. But that is chapters 1 through 5. Thank you guys so much for listening. Again, I only spoke on my key takeaways. I would love to hear from you guys. Feel free to DM me, or if you see me on the street, you can talk to me about it too. I know this is the beginning of the book, but if you have a book in mind that you'd like to go over, either go over or just read, please let me know. I'm all for recommendations. I do have the next book in mind already, but I want to hear from y'all. So until then, that is it. That is the end of the show. Okay, bye.